All right. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Smart Art Business Podcast. My name is Rachel Wilkins. I am delighted to be joined today by Mariana Ruiz. Mariana is the impact-driven entrepreneur, and she's going to be sharing some tips with you today about how you can work less and accomplish more. So, Mariana, it's great to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with your listeners.
Absolutely. So we were chatting a little bit before we jumped on the live, and you were sharing with me that while you are a business professional, you help business owners to do more in less time. You have this whole 3-day work week, 3-day CEO schedule, kind of alignment with your business. But you're also a creative as well. You're also somebody who creates their own artwork. So tell us a little bit about how your business came about and perhaps the motivation behind it.
Okay, so totally different. So I actually was a nurse. I was a professional nurse. I worked bedside nursing, and I climbed my way up the corporate ladder, which if you've ever known a nurse, I'm sure everybody listening has known a nurse who stayed in the same job for 30 years. Like, that's not uncommon. And so it's very strange to climb up in this field, and it's very difficult. And what I noticed a lot was that the more I was able to strategize and use my brain, the less I had to use my body. And at 25 years old, I had physical injuries that were crippling, being a bedside nurse and working, grueling overnights and 24-hour shifts and that kind of stuff. And so I started to climb up for health reasons initially, but saw kind of the avenue to get there was through thinking. And I was like, oh, I can do thinking. I can do this. Let's go. And so I climbed up, and I was asked to run 3 hospitals. And then that same week, my daughter was born, preemie, weighing 2 pounds. She was the size of my hand.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a really difficult moment of my life. And I decided, you know what? I'm just going to go all in. I had this very side hustle coaching business, right? And I'm like, oh, this is just this thing I do for fun. It's so fun to motivate people. And then I was like, oh no, that's going to be my thing. I'm going to go all in on this because I could do it from the bedside of the hospital. I was in, the NICU pump room, and I'm working away, doing the website, getting things set up in a more professional way, because I was like, this is going to allow me to do this. Well, thankfully I did, because she spent 68 days in that ICU. Comes home on breathing monitors. And me being a nurse, I was like, well, I'm not going to hire a nurse, right? I'm just going to take care of my child. And so I decided not to return to my corporate job and instead take care of my baby and run my business. And that's what I did. It was me and 2 kids under 2 and my husband at the time. And we just, made it work. It was really tough. I'm not going to lie, and within 7 months of leaving that career, I had completely booked out my one-on-one coaching practice. I had 15 one-on-one clients. Each was paying me $1,000 a month. So that was $15,000 a month in recurring.
Wow.
And yeah. And so it was no joke, right? It was like, we're doing this. And I was serious, and we were doing it. And with that came a lot of problems, because when you're in service work, that means you're working a lot of hours if you're doing it one-to-one, right? One client at a time that you're seeing. And that's how I was seeing all my clients. And it became very, very difficult with my 2 kids to juggle everything and all my responsibilities at home. So I started looking at ways to scale, and I started running group programs. So instead of coaching each person one-on-one, I ran almost like a class, and I would just have all of them in a group, and they would go into that class for several months at a time. Eventually that class became a year long, because I felt like they needed it, and they also needed it. And so they were grateful for it. So, and now our term is like, most people will stay for us for like 2 years. It's incredible.
So is it kind of like a mastermind?
Yes, kind of like a mastermind. We have different levels. So depending on where they are, there may be more teaching, it may be more mastermind style. It kind of depends on where they are in their own journey and what they need. And so I run those, and now I have, coaches that help and coach others underneath me. We have a team, right? So it's been an evolution. This is 7 years. It's not overnight, I like to say that because, it's like that overnight success that took 10 years. Like,
Yep.
that would be
I have
me.
the same thing. It's so funny. It's funny because it's like, I feel certainly in my business, like I've been so much more visual. Like I've been so much more like showing up more online in this last 12 months because of the pandemic, right? So we're all home, so we have that ability. And everyone's like, wow, you got so much success in the last like 12 months. I'm like, no. This has been a decade of working behind the scenes. I just actually have the time to be on camera right now because I'm not flying all over the country. So I totally relate to that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and for me, like the 3-day work week stuff happened when my son was going into kindergarten. I was like, okay, I don't know. Do you have kids or no?
I just have furry kids right now.
Okay, furry kids. Okay. So if you ever have a baby, you're with them like 24/7, especially if you work from home. And so the idea of sending him to kindergarten where I wouldn't see him for like, I don't know, our kindergarten here is 2 hours. So that just shows you how irrational this thought was.
That's amazing.
I'm like, I'm never going to see my child. So I was like, I want to create just so that I work 3 days a week so that I can have like long weekends and we could travel. It was like the summer before he went to kindergarten, and I'm like, we can travel on long day trips and just like take it easy all summer. And so that was my plan. And so that's what I did. And when the pandemic hit, I was like, oh, I already know how to handle this, right? Like I already know how to handle kids at home. I know how to handle having to work in 3 days instead of 7, which is what most entrepreneurs do, right? And so that's what I was able to do. And it really came from that skill set. But honestly, too, it's just that zeroing in. What is the most important thing? What is the thing that is going to make you money? If you do this all day, will you make money? Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Because if I do the dishes, if I do all the things here at home, all the laundry, like all the things, I'm not making any money. Mm-hmm. And so although I would love to spend all day doing that, I can't do that if it's my work day. I can't do that if it's my working hours. And I think for artists, I mean, and I don't know, because you're the one that coaches artists, so I don't know that much about it in terms of like what you know. What I do know is there's a difference between doing the service and selling the service. Mm-hmm. And so when I was stuck in that, one client at a time, if my client work took 15 hours of the week, I didn't then have those 15 hours to go market and sell. And so I had to change some things in that equation to still be able to work the 15 hours that I wanted to.
Absolutely. It's interesting because we know each other because we're both in James's program. And, one of the things that really struck a chord with me with his coaching was that, when we talked about the limiting beliefs around money, and I found one of my own limiting beliefs. And it was, I grew up with a single mom. My mom was a single mom, and it was just her and I. And, she worked like crazy. Like she worked all the time to be able to give me a really good life, like to send me to a school that wasn't in our neighborhood, that was a better school, to send me to tennis lessons. Like we were very working class. Like, so for her to be able to do all these things and work like crazy to be able to give them to me, I grew up thinking that you have to work really, really, really hard to make money. Like that was my limiting belief. So what happened was, as I started to make money in a relatively easy way, because I worked in sales for a decade, I was like, I don't deserve this money. So everything I made would go like right back out my pocket. Like I just could not retain it because I had this belief that no, you can only keep and retain money that you deserve if you've worked really, really hard. And I think we live in this like hustle culture right now. I think that the messaging that we see online is so much about you have to just constantly be hustling and working and power boss and all this like kind of things that we see on Instagram. But what you're saying is essentially, no, like take all that, get it off the table, and let's compress your work week into 3 days so that you can essentially do the things that you love. Like that's what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah.
Tell me how that kind of looks in like tangible terms. Like how do you start to introduce that into your life?
Okay. So, for me, it's been looking at those high income leverage activities, right? So what is going to get me the most visibility? Don't do the thing that's going to give you some visibility or just visibility for 2 minutes, like a Facebook post, right? That is, I mean, if we're going to start, we start to grade everything, right? So basically start putting dollar signs on everything you're doing,
Yeah.
right? So that means, okay, if I'm going to spend my time creating something that's going to give me visibility, one, I would rather do it in the most leverage way. And then from there, put systems and structures in place so that all of that work is actually multiplied. So for example, with the Facebook post and the visibility, what I do is I will appear on shows like this. I will, do lives. When I was doing lives, I actually stopped doing them last year because I had surgery. And then I was like, no, I just need a break.
It's a lot.
So it was a lot. Yeah. So, so I would do my lives or my videos. Right now we're getting ramped up to start a YouTube channel. So like I'm pre-recording the videos, all pre-recorded. And then my team is doing everything else. So they'll write a blog post from it. They will post, make all the little social media posts for it, all the stories, because those stories, I mean, great, but it lasts for 24 hours. It's gone forever. You don't want to spend your time doing things that are going to disappear quickly like that. You want the highest leverage and hire people to help you to do that. I think, maybe some of your people may be like, but Mariana, I can't afford to hire anyone, right? That's going to always be like the number one objection. And the reason that people can't afford to hire people is because they're not thinking about hiring in the right way. And that would be what we require for each person on our team is that they're making 4 to 10 times what we're paying them. That's what a small business needs to succeed. If your team members are not performing at that level, you will always have to make more sales to cover their butt. And that's not fair to you, because what that turned out for me to be is I had like all these people working for me. And then I had so much pressure to sell, plus also feed my kids, that it was insurmountable. And so I decided I was not going to build my team that way anymore. And everybody was responsible for metrics and numbers that actually produced revenue. And so it's multifaceted, but let me just break it down into a few main points. Number one, only doing the highest leverage activities. Grade every single thing you're doing if it's not making you money. And here's the litmus test. There's 2 ways to look at it. One is like, okay, if I do this, will it make me money? And if it's like 5 steps from money, the answer is still, you can convince yourself if you're super smart that it does. But but the reality is, if you did it for 24 hours straight, would you still have money at the end of that 24 hours? If the answer is no, then that is not a high enough income producing activity. Okay. So that's the first one. And then the second one is have team and people to help you to do the things that are not the highest income producer, because those still think they need to get done. Those things still need to get done. They just don't need to get done by you.
Yeah, I relate heavily to this because until really last year, I was doing all my own editing for the podcast, which was, now I look at it, I'm like, that is so bananas because it's so time consuming. And, it was taking me like 3 hours to edit a podcast. And, somebody said to me, like, you could pay somebody like $10 to $15 an hour to do that for you. Like, what is your time worth? Like, what revenue generating activities can you do in 3 hours that push your business forward when you could be, when you're spending this time editing? Like, it was ridiculous. And, what ends up happening is that you're putting out more content because you have more content because somebody else is doing it for you. So now, like, to be able to have a podcast episode come out every week, I don't touch it. After I leave this conversation, the whole thing leaves my office and goes to a video editor, to an audio editor, and then the show comes out and I don't even usually know which show is coming out. So like releasing those kind of tasks is amazing. And it just frees up not just space for, like we talked about doing things that you're passionate about or enjoying hobbies, but also frees up time to move your business forward, because I think so many of us just get stuck in this one place, right? We're like, okay, I'm making money, I'm trading, dollars for hours, I'm fine. But, like you touched on, there's only so far you can go with that model, right? You tap out at a certain point. So in order to be able to scale, you really do have to get creative. But I think it's interesting that you said about the fear that people have about hiring. Like I think there's this myth that I'm not going to be able to afford to hire out, but the freedom that comes with that is really just an incredible thing. So tell us, give us some tips that perhaps our audience can enact in regards to productivity. Like what are some hacks that you could perhaps share?
Oh boy. So I think
No pressure.
the first thing, okay, I'm just afraid that all my artists listening are going to, because I'm an artist too. Okay. So hear me out on this one. I am an artist. This is why I built my schedule the way I did, because I love the freedom. But what I know for sure, it's like if you have a blank canvas and you have no awesome idea, you can get really stuck trying to make a decision about where you're going to go. And you can stay there stuck for a long time, right? Like artist block is a real thing. Okay. Well, the same thing happens with your calendar. And what I found is that if I had more structure to my calendar, I was actually able to have the 3-day work week, right? Like more freedom. And so when I say this, I say it from this lens. That's why I'm priming you so much with this, because I don't want this like calendar scheduling to freak anyone out. It is actually what will give you freedom, and it will help you feel on top of everything instead of feeling like you're always trying to catch up. So what I basically do is on Sundays or Saturdays, I will brainstorm everything I think I need to do for the week. So it literally comes down to, I need mayonnaise from the store, like every little thing, because those are the things that like you're cooking the dinner and you didn't have the one ingredient and now you're on a, goose chase trying to get the mayonnaise, right? Like those are the things that make us feel out of a like center in our life. And so those things are so important. So on Saturday and Sunday, I basically just take the day to reflect on the week, to see what went well, what didn't go well, what do I want to change about how I showed up this week. And then I start making that exhaustive list. Some days I want to cry after doing that list because it has, 60 items on there. And I think of the week and I'm like, there's no way this is all going to fit in here, right? And so I will brainstorm it all out there, and then I start slotting it in. And it's very important that you give yourself a time frame. There's a law, it's Parkinson's law, it basically says that time will expand to whatever you allow. So if you say, I'm going to get this done by Wednesday, 99% of the time you will get it done by Wednesday, when really you could have gotten it done in 2 hours, right? And so if you constrain yourself in this way, it allows for you to have the freedom for the rest of the 2 days if you really wanted it, right? And so this single action has been the most life-changing thing for me, because it has caused me to actually be very intentional about everything, gather up all the moving pieces, and make time for the things I really care about. So as I shared with you before we started recording, I love doing art. It's like what I adore. Like I'm a musician. I did all musical theater growing up. Like it was a big thing for me. And I did art kind of like for fun. And then after I got divorced, I was like really into art. It was like how I was really healing from that experience. And for me, that has been a really important part, to make sure I'm very intentionally having the space and time to be creative every single day, not in a pressury way, right? And so for me, it's like yeah, I'll have like 4 hours of time on my schedule that are nothing. And that's when I'll do my art. And if I didn't use it for art and I feel bad because I used it on Netflix instead, the following week I can make a better choice. I can say, you know what, I'm going to do a little less Netflix, right? Or I like the show, I'm going to do a couple hours of Netflix and I'm going to add more intentional art. What might I need to get more creative, right? Do I need to go on a walk? Do I need to go outside? Like, it's that coupling of the reflection with the forward planning that has really made the biggest difference and allowed for that constraint to happen.
Yeah. And I'm a big believer in kind of compressing certain tasks and projects into certain days. Like for me as an artist and a business owner, I was always conscious not to put those two things together because I needed my business brain to be on like full throttle when I was like trying to market, trying to get press, trying to, communicate with collectors. But when I go into the studio, I needed to not think about anything that was where it might perhaps influence my creative decisions. So I didn't want to be in the studio thinking, okay, well, I need to paint like this so that this person buys, or so that, it's more marketable. I wanted to have that separation. And I think the beauty of what you're talking about is that, our community can take those 3 days just to focus on driving their business forward. And, I imagine what you can accomplish if you're doing even just 5 hours, 3 days a week, just on your business. Like, what does that look like over a year? That's a lot of progress. That's a lot of action towards getting you closer to where you want to be. And you still have 4 days in the week where you can relax, be with family, and obviously work on your creative stuff as well. So I think that's amazing. So let's talk a little bit about that self-care. That's something that you touched on your website, the importance of that. Like, is that something that you suggest that people almost schedule into that kind of structure?
Yeah. 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 Especially, I mean, if you're like me and you can put everyone else first and then you're like, oh my God, what happened? Right. And I was kind of like that. And then nursing like really trained me to be like that. I mean, we would go hours and hours without a bathroom break, And so if you're like that in any way, you need to schedule it in, and it is not optional. It's mandatory, right? And I actually, when I'm doing the calendar, I color code. And at one point during this process, I realized I wasn't taking care of my physical body, right? I wasn't exercising the way that I wanted to be. I wasn't eating at normal times. Like I just would forget to eat. And it was all a product of this. It's obviously underlying beliefs, but there's also systems you can use to keep yourself on track. So I started color coding and I said, okay, what are all my physical needs? And am I even meeting them or scheduling them? And so I have now a color coding for physical needs because I understand one, how important they are, but two, that's my tendency to let go to the background. If anything else more important comes up, I'm going to put my physical needs to the side, right? Kid is screaming, I'm definitely going to go fix kid first, and then I'll eat. And then that screaming might not be done for 4 hours. So, the reality is I have to stop and put my needs first every time so that I can be my best when I'm doing the things that I want to do.
What are some of the challenges that come with this structure? I mean, I imagine that just adjusting to the 3-day work week is going to be something that feels a little out of alignment with what most people are accustomed to. What are some of the challenges that perhaps you or your clients have experienced?
Oh my gosh, this is going to get deep real fast. Kind of what you said, which is you have to face all your limiting beliefs, right? I am not worthy enough to receive money doing this with such little effort. Is it sustainable? Can I keep this going? Also just dealing with stillness. I think we are in such a fast-paced world that having the stillness, a lot of times what I'm coaching clients through is like, I just can't stop because I'm afraid everything's going to fall apart. right? That fear that the shoe is going to drop, right? It's deep. It's very deep work. And I think everyone wants the 3-day work week in concept, but when you look at the depth of the work that's involved, it's actually pretty deep. And you have to be willing to do that. Otherwise, you're not going to sustain it. You could do it for like a season and then come right back to the old patterns.
Let's talk a little about working through those limiting beliefs. I have several around money. You've touched on some as well. Like, what are some steps that folks can take to really work through those?
Yeah, I think that the first thing is anytime that you hear yourself saying, I'm not good at that. I am just not the type of person that could do this, right? Those kinds of statements are ones where you want to have your ears perked up and write those things down. Those are opportunities for deep transformation. Our I am statements are usually our deepest seated beliefs that we don't even see as beliefs. It's just who we believe we are.
Mm.
Um, and so those, I mean, I think the first thing is awareness, right? Awareness through hearing yourself talk, hearing yourself in conversation with others, and journaling for me has been huge. So I just sit down and write every morning, pretty much every morning when I'm having my coffee, I'll write down what I'm thinking. And it's kind of like what I was talking about with the schedule. Like it's just all the things I'm thinking. It doesn't ever need to go anywhere. It might go onto my what I need to do on Saturday. It like some days if my brain is just going so much, it is 20 million other to-dos that I forgot, and I let myself have permission to it be whatever it needs to be.
Yeah.
There's no right or wrong. I think when I bring up journals, sometimes people get like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. I'm like, well, did you write a word? Because that's all you need, right? It's kind of like art. If you did something on that paper, that counts, right? Like that still counts. So I journal and then I look at those thoughts and I ask myself if it's in alignment with the person that I'm trying to become, right? So if when I was working on 3-day work week, it was, okay, is this in alignment with the 3-day CEO? And if it was, okay, I just overworked all night, then I'd be like, okay, well, that's not in alignment with who I'm trying to be, right? Why did I do that? What was my tendency? What was my fear, right? And just like giving yourself that space to feel your feelings, to have the conversations with yourself about what you're doing and how you're showing up, and asking if that's how you want to continue or not, and then making decisions from there.
I love that you touched on fear because it's just it's really like the root of everything, I think. And we tend to like not emotional, like not to make business emotional, but we're, especially when we're like solo entrepreneurs, which a lot of our listeners are. They're running their own practice, they're artist entrepreneurs. But fear can motivate so many of our decisions, good, bad, or indifferent, right? It's something that I think of it as like the boogeyman. I heard a great analogy. Somebody said, fear is false evidence appearing real, right? It's
Yeah.
telling you, that messaging that from wherever, from the environment you grew up in, from, what you've heard from peers, what you've heard from society, you are not good enough. And until we address that, so many of our decisions, so many of our choices are going to be coming from the wrong place, right? And it's something that I think a lot of us really need to look at. I've certainly had my own battles with it, and I still do. But I love that you go to journaling. I think that there's so much power in putting pen to paper and actually seeing, even just sometimes a stream of consciousness, right? Just seeing what is up there, what nonsense you've been telling yourself, and getting a good look at it on paper. It almost like releases the nonsense, right? That narrative, that crazy narrative. So I think that's super, super important to know that, there are successful people who still have to navigate that emotion, right? That there are people out there that deal with that on the daily. So, for anybody who's listening who, perhaps is just starting out and thinking that, these fears are something that, are going to limit you, I think it can be an active choice to say, no, I'm not going to let those fears stop me doing the things that I want to do. So you talk about your whole business is impact driven entrepreneur. And I think I like to think of impact in a couple of ways. So impact being income, right? First and foremost, impact is how much revenue can I make so I can continue to move forward, but also impact in the sense of other accomplishments that aren't necessarily directly correlated with instant revenue. So things like what we're doing right now, having a conversation on a podcast, or perhaps for an artist, showing their work at a gallery space, not always immediate income related. Talk to us a little bit more about perhaps some ways that folks can really just align themselves with impact goals.
Yeah, so we teach like different levels of impact. So the first is, like you said, money. What is that money going to do for you, for your family, et cetera? It's that very personal impact on yourself and your family. The second is your clients. So, and for everybody listening, you are impacting your clients. They're buying it, right? Or however you're deciding to sell it. I'm not sure how people sell art, so I can't speak to that. But like for me, if I have something that I enjoy looking at every day and I feel a feeling when I look at it, that is impact. So you already are making that impact, that legacy all the time. And then the other one is the team that you're going to be able to hire. So at one point we were living in South Texas, and I had a nanny who was a retired lady, retired from a nonprofit. And I asked her what she was up to and whatever. And she said she was buying an air conditioner in South Texas. We lived in like 110-degree weather. And she was finally buying an air conditioner because of the job that I gave her nannying my children. And I just like broke down crying, because I'm like, wow, I never thought that like me being able to afford to hire somebody could make this much of an impact, right? So the people that you're hiring, and then there's giving back, right? So if you wanted to give back to charities or things that matter to you, for me, that's always been really meaningful over, having to be this big thing. Meaningful things. So for us, there was a lady who left an abusive relationship. I gave her and her kids diapers and clothes and that kind of thing as the donation. It didn't have to be this big thing, but it was something that was meaningful to her at that moment that she needed it. And then the other way is invisible impact. So this is impact that you will never know about, never probably even know happen. It's kind of what you're saying with the podcast, right? Somebody listens to the podcast. It's like the exact thing they needed at that exact time. And that's like a beautiful gift that we give to the world. So those are our levels of impact. And I like to say, if you resonate with one of those more than others as your driver, then use that to fuel yourself every day, right? Use that to be the guiding light. Like, you know what? I wonder how I might be able to do this kind of impact today. And it's okay if it's number one, right? If it's you and your family, it's okay. You are not selfish because you have a goal that is only involving yourself and your family. I think that's a big societal misconception. So wherever you are in your levels of impact, some people, like the monetary for themselves doesn't really do anything for them, and they care about others. And so again, just whatever resonates the most with you, anchor yourself to it every day.
I think that's amazing advice. And I couldn't help thinking about another limiting belief that I've heard from my community about money, which was, this idea that money is the root of all evil and money is used to do bad things. But when you share, some of those impact related things that have happened as a result of you working to build business and make revenue, that's amazing, right? To be able to help other people, to be able to help this woman that was going through this terrible experience. And that is money that allowed you to be able to do that. So I think that's really incredible.
Can I share one more thing about
that?
that?
Please.
Okay. So I thought about, is money the root of all evil, for a very long time. In my journals, I've written out about it. And what I determined as myself, just on my own accord, if anyone's interested, is that it's not the money, it's scarcity mindset. Scarcity mindset is what is the root of all evil, because if it was just the money, then it wouldn't matter. You just go make more. It's the idea that you can't get more money. It's the idea that no more is coming, or that it's a fixed pie. That is what is the root of all evil. That's what causes people to steal, to like murder people, right? Like it's the idea that there's not enough, or that they need to get it from someone else to have it. And so that is my opinion, in case anyone wants to know about scarcity, about money.
What is the opposite of scarcity? Abundance, right? So it's
Right.
taking that word and really just trying to shift. And that's hard. That is a hard thing to do, especially as a solo business owner. I mean, it's, when you are the person that's solely responsible for what's in your bank account, that can be a challenge.
Yeah. And that's why coaching is so important, right? Because if you don't have a safe community where you can talk about this stuff, you feel like you're alone. And then, people will kind of judge you based on the external, right? So, like in my family, I remember my ex-husband, like he was furloughed from his job, and he worked in the government, and I was going to have to pay all of the bills for that month. And I wasn't used to that, right? We were used to a 2-family income. And I remember like loving members of our family being like, you should just go get a real job, so that, you also had all the insurance benefits and this and that, right? And so it's clouded by other people's misconceptions about money and their expectations of what job security looks like. When in reality, I was so fortunate to have a coach that I could say, like, listen, I need to make X amount more money. Like, let's make a plan and let's get this to work. And having that safe space in someone who believes in you like that, and is not going to judge it based on what society expects, or based on what's actually in your account versus what is possible for you, which is always everything. Always everything is possible for you. And so having that person in your corner is absolutely critical.
1,000%. Well, this has been absolutely packed with valuable nuggets. I know that our community are going to really get some value from this. Is there anything that perhaps piece of advice, or some information on perhaps how people can get in contact with you and work with you? Anything that you'd like to leave our audience with?
Sure. So if you're interested in running a coaching or consulting business, doing that 3 days a week, you can go to our website, Impact Driven Entrepreneur. And right now we're hosting pretty much weekly trainings to help you to do this in your business. We run webinars every week right now. Or just join our community. Like if you're like, I'm kind of interested in that, but I don't know if I'm quite ready, just join our Facebook group, the Coaching for Impact Community. And in there, we give you lots of tips and strategies for growing a coaching or consulting business.
Amazing. All right. Well, Mariana, it's been such a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for joining me this afternoon, or this morning, even. It's 10:40 a.m. I'm getting way ahead of myself. It's been such a pleasure. And thank you again. This has been the Smart Art Business Podcast. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you do feel inclined, please do leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. And of course, share this episode far and wide. Thanks so much.